Welcome to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you check them out on Facebook, Jackie Richardson and our friend Alex Ramos. They do a great job over there helping out retired boxers. I am your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome the resident boxing historian for the Grueling Truth, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Christopher?
Good, Mike. Glad to be here and ready to go for another history flashback.
All right, and today we're going to talk a little Michael Spinks, who, for my money, is one of the top, at worst, 5 light heavyweight champions of all time. I actually would have him in my top 3. And Chris, I think we both agree that he's a guy that gets kind of a raw deal for people because people just remember that last heavyweight title fight against Mike Tyson.
Yeah, it's so sad because it's so high profile, that first round loss to Mike Tyson, and what many people don't really remember, even seem to care, is that he had gone more than 12 years without losing before that fight. I mean, that's an incredible run through the amateur and professional ranks. Olympic gold middleweight champion, light heavyweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion, and yet you're right. One first round, 91-second loss is unfortunately what people want to remember because they like Mike Tyson, and Michael Spinks gets the raw end of the deal.
Well, Michael Spinks always kind of got the raw end of the deal, I think, just because he was kind of a quiet, unassuming guy that just went about his business. And if you look on the great 1976 Montreal Olympic team, Spinks gets overlooked by the Sugar Ray Leonards, his brother Leon, even Howard Davis, who never really achieved anything professionally outside of losing a couple shots at the title. And when you look at Spinks' amateur career, he won the 1974 Gold Gloves Light Middleweight Championship. He won his 165-pound AAU title, and he went to the Olympics. And at the Olympics, he benefited from a favorable draw. He had a bye and 2 wins by walkover. Right. He was only required to box 2 opponents. He won the gold medal in the middleweight division, where he went on to defeat the Soviet Union's Rufat Raskelyev. I don't know. Close enough.
Okay. Yeah, they're a very dominant win. He started a knockdown in the second round, and a knockdown, and eventually a knockout in the third round. And I remember that Olympic team was one of my favorites. Love Sugar Ray Leonard. I love Leon Spinks. And then Howard Davis had his mom died right before the tournament, so that was a feel-good story. And watching the Michael Spinks, because Michael Spinks is so dominant that they even said then that he's the kind of the one nobody cares about, the one. For whatever reason, he didn't give a vibe that they thought he was as important in name recognition as the others, even though he was so dominant and had such a dominant professional career. There's just something that I guess he was just in the wrong place as far as charismatic people and great American boxers. I mean, right now, if we had an American boxer in the Olympics that could do anything, he'd be amazing. But back then, a lot of the American boxers were amazing. He was just one more.
Yeah, and the thing was, he didn't get any big TV contract after winning the gold medal. He's the one guy that didn't. Even Leo Randolph, who was a lot lower weight, had that. And he returned to work at a chemical factory in his hometown of St. Louis, Missouri, scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets. And, you know, he had...
Returned as a dishwasher, and then he said when he got the janitor job, he really liked the women's room because it had a TV and a sofa. So he just crashed out on the sofa until his supervisor, named Alton or something, was screaming at him, "I don't care if you're the Olympic champion. You need to get your ass in work." But it must be a real come down to, you're Olympic for about, 2 months you're special, the Olympic gold medal winner, and now you're sleeping in a women's toilet and sweeping floors when your boss is looking at you.
Yeah, and it was Butch Lewis who in 1977 convinced Michael to turn professional. And he turned professional with a win over Eddie Benson, who he knocked out in the first round in Las Vegas. And he kind of had a hit and miss first few years. In 1978, he only won 2 fights. And a lot of that was because he had to take care of his mother at the time. And also he had to take care of Leon, who shockingly, in his 8th professional fight, won the heavyweight championship of the world. And I know when you watch the 2 Ali Spinks fights, you always see Michael in his corner.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing about the brothers, they're very close because you always see Leon in Michael Spinks' corner, too, and actually, talking to the opponent, too, wishing good luck and such. And, Michael Spinks is there for his brother, and the brother, shockingly, in his eighth pro fight, gave Muhammad Ali his third loss. It was a great performance by Leon Spinks. Just Muhammad Ali was doing his "I'll wait till he tires out." Leon Spinks wasn't tiring out, and even landing hard punches in the 15th round. Gave Muhammad Ali his third loss, his only loss as a heavyweight champion, and it was front page news everywhere.
Yeah, and when you look at his career, his first 10, 11 fights are like everybody else's. He fights a bunch of nondescript guys. But when you get to early 1980, you got guys like Ramon Ronquillo, Murray Sutherland, David, that's not John Conte, but Murray Sutherland. And then the fight that really got my attention was against Yaki Lopez. And Yaki Lopez is a guy that I've got to interview on the shows before. He was a tough SOB. And he knocked out Yaki Lopez, which really got my attention. I remember watching that fight. I think it was on CBS Sports. And right there, I think, combined with the wins over Sutherland and Ronquillo, you knew this guy was going to be special.
Oh, yeah, the hell of a fight. If the listeners like to YouTube these things, the Yaki Lopez-Michael Spinks fight is a lot of fun to watch, a TKO 7 for Spinks. And, Yaki Lopez just charging in and throwing punches and wailing away and has the best of Spinks, though it's only slightly misleading because Michael Spinks always literally gets off to a slow start. He likes to figure out his opponent. He likes to counter. And he says, I like the fights to go a little bit farther because I want a harder workout. I want more to learn. And but Yaki Lopez you want to play with because this guy's going to knock your head off if you don't take him out when you can. So that's a hell of a fight. A lot of fun to watch. Probably the funnest fight for me to watch of all Michael Spinks' professional fights.
Yeah, because the thing that surprised me there is I watched that fight before I got to interview Yaki Lopez, and the thing that struck me is until he got knocked out, it was a fairly even fight.
Oh yeah, I think Lopez. You could argue really certainly that he's leading even after 5 rounds and such. Because Michael Spinks is a little bit slow, and because Lopez is so aggressive and landing punches and stuff. Yeah, it's more than even. I think Lopez probably has an advantage, and then Spinks, finds his openings. He's always looking to his openings and it's hidden punches, and then once he starts doing that, his accuracy. He really is a great finisher once he sees somebody in trouble. Just landing these accurate, hard punches that he sometimes hides a little bit with his footwork and head movement and such, trying to figure out what to do or how to ambush his opponent.
Yeah, and then we go to March of 1981, and he fought Marvin Johnson, who was a man that had been the light heavyweight champion. I think he upset Victor Galindez in like 78 or 79 to win that. Then he immediately lost it back. And he would go on to win the light heavyweight title again a few years later. Marvin Johnson, to me, is a borderline Hall of Famer, and Michael Spinks took care of him easily.
Well, it's a very interesting fight because Marvin Johnson is a great fighter to watch. He's aggressive. He keeps coming at you. He has a great sort of momentum with his punches. They're landing hard. Spinks is being back toward the ropes. And I think Johnson was the first 3 rounds out of 4. And it looks like Spinks is really in trouble with this guy. Though there's talk that kept filtering with Spinks that maybe he's a little bit of a dirty fighter. I don't know if he's a dirty fighter, but he does hold. He does like to push. He likes to clinch. He likes to elbow a little bit. Not really that bad, but he does it. And it bothered his opponent. It bothered Marvin Johnson. And then the 4th round, Spinks said he's looking for this opening, and he's usually the Spinks jinx is his overhand right, and this time he landed a left that Johnson just didn't see. And I mean, that was it. That was a lights-out, one-punch knockout, which is not Michael Spinks. But wow, Marvin Johnson was flat out, and if people don't think Michael Spinks could hit, ask Marvin Johnson whenever he regained consciousness and knew who he was.
Yeah, I talked to Marvin a couple years ago. He has woke up. And he does not remember that 4th round. Then he fights Eddie Mustafa Muhammad for the title. Now, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad was a guy who was already talking about going to heavyweight and actually didn't meet the 175-pound limit right away. He had to go back, lose a pound or two, get back on the scale to make it. And this was a fight where Michael Spinks, I think, clearly controlled it. He threw a combination in the 8th round that closed Mustafa Muhammad's eye. But this was a really good performance by Spinks against a very underrated Eddie Mustafa Muhammad.
Oh, yeah. Muhammad's a terrific fighter, and I would say through 7 rounds, is fairly leading the fight against Spinks. But he lost over 20 pounds in just over a month, and obviously someone like Michael Spinks knows that, so he's biding his time, which Michael Spinks does, and from the 8th round on, controls it, eventually knocks down Mustafa, but Mustafa just finally tires out, and I think it really was the weight training problem. He changed his name. He seemed like his head wasn't right for such a big fight, while Michael Spinks was, this is a chance at a title, and just very patient, and once he starts dominating and taking control, it's just sort of a matter of time that Muhammad's like in that situation. There's 1 round left, 3 minutes, and you better knock Michael Spinks out, and then at that point, Spinks will bicycle a little bit, throw some jabs, kind of move around the center of the ring, and now you're down to 90 seconds, and you're not going to knock him out. Michael Spinks had a very deserved victory over a great fighter.
Yeah, and I think even though Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, I think, was already in his mind a heavyweight, I still think Michael Spinks would have beat him on any night.
Yeah, it's probably true. It's hard to say because
it would have been closer, but
yeah, it would have been closer, and definitely Spinks is going to take what's given to him. And if he's ready and trains hard and thinks the other guy's, not really in his best shape, well, God bless it. That just means he's going to be a little more patient than otherwise. But I agree, Spinks overall with his career and such.
How about this? I think that's the difference between a guy like Spinks and a guy like Mustafa Muhammad, because Michael Spinks always took care of himself. He never heard about him ballooning up to 230 pounds in between fights. Maybe that's because he fought so much, because when you go to his title defenses, he defended a title against Von Zell Johnson 4 months after winning it. 3 months later, Mustafa Waja. 2 months later, Murray Sutherland. 2 months later, Jerry Celestine. And then 3 months later, Johnny Davis. Now, all these guys were pretty good fighters, especially Johnny Davis, him and Eddie Davis both were light heavyweight contenders. And the thing that stood out to me is when you talked about he was undefeated for all this time, you look at his record, you think he didn't fight that much. But out of those 31 fights, 21 of those guys were high-quality opponents.
Yeah, I agree. These are high-quality light heavyweights, and that Spinks, he towers in the sense he's 6'2.5", and seems to be larger than his opponents. One of the most interesting things about Michael Spinks for me is that most fighters you could just immediately define their style. But Michael Spinks comes at you in an awkward sort of way. He's slightly alters his approach, except for maybe being patient with most of his opponents. And you're right, he sort of adapted to each one and controlled and dominated, at least to this point. I don't think he's had a particularly close fight, other than maybe losing rounds or being behind in a fight. He's clearly he and Cowie are clearly the two light heavyweight, the best.
Yeah, and they fought for the undisputed title in Atlantic City, March the 18th, 1983. And basically, Qawi had taken care of Matthew Saad Muhammad, who was about the only guy Michael Spinks hadn't taken care of in the top 10. And this was a fight that I think was pretty even. Going into the fight, Spinks was probably a small favorite. But this was, I remember a lot of people compared it kind of Ali Frazier because of the styles a little bit. That and the fact that you had two guys that were Qawi, I think, had lost one fight coming into this. Spinks was undefeated. My favorite Dwight Muhammad Qawi was when he was Dwight Braxton and he went to Rahway State Prison and pretty much ended, James Scott. Almost forgot his name for a second. But he had a great fight there. And this was a fight that I think was on HBO. This was probably the biggest light heavyweight title fight in years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it was great to have that. Cowie is such a fun fighter to watch. He's a smaller, stout man who just keeps coming at you. And Michael Spinks had a lot more going on than usual in the sense that he was arrested by the police for gun possession, and within 48 hours, his wife, 24 years old, was killed in a car crash. So he has his daughter in the locker room before the fight, and his daughter asked him, "Is Mommy going to watch the fight tonight?" And how do you hear that and then have to go out in the ring in the biggest fight of your life? But both Cowie and Spinks fought smart. Spinks clearly seems to be, I think, overall the dominant man. Cowie gets the only knockdown of Spinks before Tyson. It was a very strange knockdown.
Oh, he stepped on his foot, though.
Down.
Yeah,
exactly. They ruled it a knockdown, but I'm really glad that didn't affect it because that could be a 2-point round and such. And because Spinks is, I don't know if he's giving away rounds, but he's certainly giving Cowie a lot of respect until he starts taking over again, around 8, 9 in that area. And once he does, he's definitely the dominant fighter. And at least in everyone's eyes by the 15th round, Cowie's in the same position. You got 3 minutes. That's it to knock Michael Spinks out. And that's when Spinks doesn't really try to win the round. He just tries to land a couple combinations, a few jabs, move around, and make your opponent kind of desperate to try to knock you out. And it's a great win for Spinks. And I think even more so when you see Cowie in that first fight, and a later fight against Evander Holyfield.
Oh, yeah.
And the fight of one of the fight of the centuries, and what a great fighter Cowie is. That Michael Spinks, I think, I wouldn't say dominated, but I think he won, pretty convincingly.
Yeah, I had it like 10-5 at the time.
Yeah, I think so in that area too. Yeah,
I think he controlled the fight, and that was the thing. You talk about ring generalship at light heavyweight. You're not going to see many better than Michael Spinks. He could control you just by making a subtle move this way or that way, and he completely neutralized Kwa Wei's ability to get inside and brawl, which is what he chose to want to do most of the time.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I do. So Spinks had to punch down, but Cowie certainly wanted to go in, move in close, land body punches. So the headshot, but Spinks was almost impossible to hit to the head. Cowie just kept missing shot after shot, couldn't quite get his combinations. Whenever he did start to look like he hurt Spinks even a little bit, he couldn't follow up in any way because Spinks, again, you're right, his generalship, his foot movement, just makes it a little awkward what to do. And then once you're thrown off in an awkward situation, Michael Spinks will suddenly land these accurate punches and win the round and take control, and all of a sudden you think, this one guy's purely dominating the other, and Cowie is a great fighter, but Spinks was definitely the better one of the two.
Yeah, and then he defends against an unknown Oscar Rivenderia, however you say that. But it's a fight that I put on our Facebook channel the other day, and this was a fight where it really stood out to me that almost every punch Spinks threw was with bad intentions.
Yeah, and when Spinks is really on his game, with the footwork, the generalship, the head movement, but when he lands, he can be extraordinarily accurate. And yes, I think he's a much harder puncher than people realize, especially when he starts landing with both hands. He's got the overhand right, the Spinks jinx, but he can hit with the left. And once he starts landing these combinations and these accurate punches, you're really taking a pounding. And Spinks said, I really don't want to hurt my opponents, but he certainly had to because that's boxing.
Yeah, and then his next defense was against Eddie Davis. And to me, this is the closest, even though you would never know it by looking at Larry Hazard and Joe Cortez's scorecards. This, to me, was the closest he came to losing a fight because Carol Castellano had to fight 115-114 for Spinks. And I think that this was a fight that really could have went either way when you watch it.
Oh, yeah, it's an extraordinary close fight. You can sense the fans who were originally sort of cheering for Spinks, in the beginning of the fight, they sense an upset. Everybody's sensing an upset with Eddie Davis. And Eddie Davis is getting more confident as the fight moves on. He even puts his hands up sort of triumphant at one point, knowing that Spinks is missing a lot of punches, which is very unusual. But I first I have it with the announcers on, and then I thought, gosh, maybe Davis won this fight. So I twice turned the volume down and said, I just want to watch it. And it is an extraordinary close fight. I would give it the one card gave Spinks as just a 1-point slight advantage. I like that, a slight advantage. I hate to take away the title on a fight like that, but Eddie Davis came in 32 years old. He was ready, and I don't think Michael Spinks undertrained, but he must have underestimated or something because it's just very unusual to see Michael Spinks miss so many punches. And Eddie Davis, once his confidence picks up, he's with a crowd. There's an upset in the making, and I still like Spinks getting the overall win.
Yeah, I do too. When I originally watched it as a freshman in high school, I videotaped it, and I thought Davis won the fight. But when I watched it a year or two later, or even watch it to today, I think Michael Spinks won it, but it was very close. And then next up, he takes like a year off, which is unlike him. And the interesting thing here is for Davis, he weighed like 172, 173. His next defense a year later against David Sears, he only weighed 170 pounds. And this is about a year and 7 months, or actually 7 months before he would fight Larry Holmes for the heavyweight title. David Sears was a guy that got there, basically had the right complexion to make the connection. And that connection, if I remember right, was Sylvester Stallone and Burt Young. Weren't they?
Burt Young, that's right.
Yeah.
Burt Young had owned a guy from Rocky, in case people don't know, the brother-in-law. right,
Paulie.
involved in the boxing industry too. But essentially, because Spinks is at a lower weight, is because he's already preparing for Larry Holmes. He's already the bait's out there, and that it looks like Holmes is thinking about fighting him. And then of course I think Larry Merchant would say that would be ridiculous for Spinks to go against Larry Holmes. I don't care how great a fighter he is. Larry Holmes could simply blow out his breath and knock Spinks down. It'd be ridiculous for Spinks to think he had any hope or any light heavyweight have any hope at all against a guy like Larry Holmes. But he took care of business against David Spears, TKO 3, and then he had the opportunity to fight Holmes, and he asked for a little more time. And fought a Marine, Jim McDonald. It's actually a pretty good,
that was one of my favorite fights. I remember watching that because I think, didn't Alonzo Ratliff upset Carlos De Leon on the undercard?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a very, it's a fun fight. It's a fun fight to watch. Also, all military stuff.
A lot of blood too, and the military stuff before with Don King is so contrived it'll make you sick to your stomach.
Right, it is. It's Don King loves America. Well, of course, he killed 2 people and got away with it and made a lot of money.
Only in America. Too. That's not really true
because
you could do that in Middle Eastern countries too, like Saudi Arabia and stuff. They're cool with it too, as long as you're one of the popular kids with a lot of money. But Jim McDonald was a tough dude, and it was the last time he was tough dude because I watched Virgil Hill beat the hell out of him. I think Donnie Lalonde beat the hell out of him. But it was a good fight, a lot of blood, and that leads us to the Larry Holmes fight. And the thing that still amazes me to this day is he weighed 175 for McDonald, and people always kind of overlooked this. But 3 months later, he's weighing 200 pounds to fight Larry Holmes.
Right. I don't think he juiced up or anything. He has this incredible regimen of he got a trainer and a special nutritional program
Mackie Shilstone
that would try to give him concentrated pounds. Yeah, it was very interesting seeing the sort of lead up to what he plans to do just to be in the ring with Larry Holmes. And I was looking forward to it because Larry Holmes had become aggravating. It looked like he was taking on, I don't know about Stiss at this point, but it looked like these 15 rounds, the most boring fights ever. And it looked like Larry Holmes was almost kind of half laughing, half bored. And certainly as a spectator I was. So you kind of wanted anybody to go up and maybe stop him. Not stop him because he is a deserving heavyweight champion in general, but I felt that he looked like they're boring fights. He's a boring champion at this point.
I think what it was is I think Holmes was so sick of Don King that he wouldn't fight the Don King heavyweights. So that led him to fighting the Bone Crusher Smith and the David Bays. And really, if you watch those fights, Holmes actually struggled at times with Bay and Bone Crusher. So I think it was boredom. And from talking to Holmes, it was boredom.
Yeah.
And he went up against an all-time great fighter. And I remember watching an interview on YouTube with Spinks after the fight. This is like a week or two after. It was on a talk show. And they asked him, when did you really start to believe you could beat Larry Holmes? And he looked at the guy and he laughed and he said, after they gave the decision.
Oh, wow. Well, it's one of the funnest fights to watch because Michael Spinks is running around on his bicycle, sort of showing his back to Larry Holmes and coming in, landing some quick punches, especially in the early rounds. He's clearly picking up early rounds against Holmes, landing, and his footwork kept Holmes awkward. Holmes was going sort of side to side instead of going forward because Michael Spinks was a little difficult to figure out what to do. And Holmes looked slower than he usually does because Michael Spinks was making him look bad. And Michael Spinks looked gassed by the 6th round, but I think he was gassed by the 4th round.
I don't think he was. I mean,
you think it was play acting?
I don't think it was play acting. If you remember this, and I have some experience with this now because I train football players, a lot of them in the NFL, but I trained them the same way with the high interval intensity training. And if you remember watching the HBO, which you probably did because I think it's attached to almost every version of this on YouTube, but they showed him with Mackie Shilstone and doing the running. And if you remember, if you go back and watch that, after he would run hard for 30 seconds and then recover for 30 seconds, Mackie Shilstone would tell him, breathe as hard as you can, take in as much air as you can. So I think the fact that we saw him breathing like that, it was part of the training that they did. And Mackie Shilstone, to this day, is training boxers NFL football players, basketball players, just because of off of this one night. Because Mackie Shilstone and what he did changed the way guys train now. Because before, if you were lifting, you wanted a lot of carbohydrates and everything, and they did a 4,500 calorie diet, which was 65% carbohydrates, 20% protein, 15% fat. And the sprints that they ran, instead of doing traditional nonstop road work, they would do 800s with a minute in between, then 400s, 200s, and 100s. And what they were doing was they were getting him prepared to be able to go at a high intensity pace for 3 minutes, take a minute off, and bring himself up. And the thing that's amazing about what he did by putting on that 25 pounds is he actually became a pound and a half leaner overall, because his body fat, when he fought Diamond Jim McDonald, was 9.1%. When he fought Holmes, it was 7.2%.
Well, also, I think, he was probably thinking about his wind and thinking about his endurance and stuff. But one of the things Spinks would do a lot of times, which frustrated his cornerman, he would improvise in the ring because he liked to see what his opponent was doing. So he said later, so what he noticed is that Holmes wasn't looking him in the eye, which he thought was unusual. So he thought he could move around and do a little bit more of a peekaboo style that he wasn't necessarily planning. And he also said that Holmes had a two jab, and after he threw his two jabs, he was putting his hands down, and that he was watching it because he thought, I could jump in and land a left uppercut. And he was studying Holmes and while he was doing it. And that was one of the things he was always very interesting about Spinks, is that he went his own way because there might be a fight plan, but he liked to see what his opponent was doing. And he thought, hey, you know what? I think Holmes is a little bit more lethargic than people would expect, and I could be aggressive, jump in and out. And you're right, catching his wind. And I actually thought that I would have given him more of a win than he was. It was just 1 point. I think on a couple of the judges' cards, but I'm really glad Michael Spinks got the win. And Larry Holmes, of course, had the famous save because Rocky Marciano is going to tie Rocky Marciano's unbeaten streak for heavyweight starting out the career. The family shows up. They're willing to pass the baton. Lovely everything. And then after the fight, Larry Holmes' in a bitter mood. Rocky Marciano couldn't hold my jock strap and really made himself unpleasant and unlikable. And it's such a shame. But Michael Spinks, I don't know why some people thought he didn't have heart. I thought he had heart in a lot of his fights.
I thought he always had heart. Michael Spinks had nothing but heart.
But this is one for the ages as far as he's going to go in there and you don't care how he looks or what he is. The fans loved it, though, because they knew this guy's really going to compete. If nothing else, he's competing with Larry Holmes. He's not going to play Larry Holmes' game. He's going to throw Larry Holmes completely off track, and Larry Holmes never could quite adjust to what Michael Spinks is doing as far as his footwork. And throwing Holmes off, so he just couldn't step forward. He kept going side to side and just not having a lot of trouble with his jab and landing in general. Just a terrific fight, and I'm just so happy for Michael Spinks, heavyweight champion. That's why we're doing the interview.
And it was a 6-1 underdog. So for everybody that said Holmes was over the hill and everything, it wasn't thought that at the time. Holmes weighed, it wasn't like he came in way out of shape. Now there are, and
no light heavyweight ever beat the heavyweight champion. I'm sorry.
Well,
no light
heavyweight champion had ever beat a heavyweight champion. There had been light heavyweights that beat guys that were champion at some point.
Yeah, but the Billy Conn to give a great fight against Joe Louis, but the size, it eventually wears you down.
Yeah, and let's face it, a 1980 Larry Holmes would beat the hell out of the best version of Michael Spinks, but that's just because of size.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The Larry Holmes that fought Ken Norton, fortunately, Michael Spinks didn't have to face that Larry Holmes. He fought the Larry Holmes that he fought that night. And,
he did what he had to do.
Again, he did what he had to do. And the interesting thing is that Larry Holmes being distracted, not looking him in the eye, that maybe Larry Holmes thought this wasn't going to be such a tough guy or was looking past it or something. I don't know.
But do you think Holmes maybe was just hanging on to get the 50th win and retire?
I don't think he could have. I think he might have hoped that in his heart, but I don't see Holmes retiring. He's got to have something to do, and so I think he always is going to come back in the ring and get defeated. But I mean, I guess because Holmes never fought George Foreman, which annoyed me, I was just sort of glad that it ended the way it did. Holmes eventually, had some good fights left in him.
Yeah, but when was Holmes
not
going
that
to
night.
fight Foreman? I mean, it would have had to have been in the 90s when they were both way past their prime.
Oh yeah, no, I meant that Foreman always said there in his 10 years when he was off being a preacher that I would have stepped in and fought Larry Holmes. But Larry Holmes wouldn't fight me. But I would have, fought him. Holmes wouldn't. And Foreman said it's the only guy I've ever disliked. Anybody I ever in the pugilism game, as far as boxers, only Larry Holmes is who I hate, and that's because the man wouldn't fight me and talk trash about him.
You know what? George Foreman retired. So don't sit there and bitch because in 1981, when you weighed 330 pounds, that nobody took you seriously.
Or honestly, Larry Holmes could say it in a legitimate way. Well, let's see you come back and have a couple fights first.
Yeah, that's probably why Holmes mocked him, because at the time, Foreman wasn't well respected because of the fight against Jimmy Young, because people never really gave Jimmy Young the credit he deserved. And
right.
Let's go ahead. Let's move on to the rematch where Holmes was still a 7.5 to 5 favorite. Who'd you have winning this fight?
I don't even have it close. I think Larry Holmes won by such a dominant factor that I love Michael Spinks.
I agree, and I love Michael. I put it like this. I remember watching that fight in 1986 in my parents' living room, and when it was over, I thought, well, hell, he lost. And then they give the decision, and I was happy because I was a huge Michael Spinks fan.
Yes, I'm exactly the same way. I was so happy that Michael Spinks retained his title, but he deserved it. Larry Holmes not only landed the harder punches, he dominated nearly every round. I mean, I would think maybe Michael Spinks at best maybe won 3 rounds very late in the contest, but Larry Holmes dominated him. He cut off the ring much better. Spinks just couldn't pull up his antics that he did in the first fight, and in the end, I was having Michael Spinks won, but the wrong person won. Larry Holmes not only won, I thought he won in a very dominant way.
All right, then 5 months later or so, or a year later, whatever it was, he fights maybe the worst heavyweight title challenger of all time from Norway, a place where boxing was banned in 1981. But I'm going to say this. When I say Stefan Tangstad, I also want to bring up the fact that Spinks was a 7.5 to 1 betting favorite. He was only a.
Well, I had money to lay it on Spinks.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I mean, those are almost the same odds that Spinks overcame to beat Holmes. This was a fight that Tangstad made enough money. He never fought again. He was paid like $50,000. Plus, he got Scandinavian film and TV rights. There's not much to say about this fight because it wasn't much of a fight, and really, it surprises me Tangstad lasted as long as he did.
Right. I think. Spinks, you're always allowed, just to try to make your money and stuff, the heavyweight champion is allowed to fight at least one chump. Usually they say a European. In Norway, not only Norway was boxing banned, Stefan's name was banned. He's not even allowed to use that name as it's illegal because in Norway's, whatever their laws are that are weird, or at least to an American. It's a ridiculous fight for Michael Spinks to take on. And then in the 4th round, when Spinks knocks him down a couple times, Tangstad actually said to the referee, I'm ready to stop. If you want to call this thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, I just want to retire, take my $50,000 and my Scandinavian TV rights and just kind of disappear into the sunset. All right, and that brings us to a controversial moment, which was Spinks was stripped of the IBF heavyweight title in February of 1987 for refusing to fight Tony Tucker, the #1 IBF contender. Don King won the right to promote a Spinks-Tucker title fight with a purse bid of $711,000. In the case of the purse bid, the purse is divided, 75% to the champion, 25% to the challenger. That would have meant $533,000 for Spinks. So instead of fighting Tucker, Spinks chose to fight Jerry Cooney for a guaranteed purse of $4 million. Now, I want to bring up the fact that to fight Stefan Tangstad, Michael Spinks' purse was $1 million. To fight Tony Tucker, They wanted to pay him $533,000, and this is where HBO had put together that heavyweight tournament, and they wanted Spinks to be a part of it, but I don't think you can blame Spinks for taking $4 million to fight over $500,000.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, Tony Tucker doesn't bring anything into the ring as far as an audience, and Jerry Cooney still only had one loss. The guy's listed at 6'6" to 6'7". He towers over Michael Spinks. It's a much more intriguing fight. You got celebrities. It's a very exciting can Cooney regain his title against this much smaller person? And of course, Spinks isn't that small. He's 6'2.5", but he looks small against Jerry Cooney. And then Spinks just was brilliant in attacking him. His accuracy was unbelievable. He's landing everything against Cooney. Cooney, had a good fourth round, or Spinks was resting up. I'm not sure, but in the fifth round, when Spinks knocks Cooney down a couple of times, Cooney doesn't hold Spinks. Cooney can't defend himself, and Spinks is just landing right, left, just battering him. You're like, the referee, hey, you got to stop this thing. Michael Spinks is just giving Cooney an ass beating, and yet had the bell rung and Cooney just hung on and stuff. I'm glad the referee stopped it. Spinks would have been exhausted. I mean, Spinks threw everything into knocking out Cooney in that round, but I think it worked out the way it should, and Michael Spinks is a great win, because you have to ask him, are you really the heavyweight champion? Do you think you're the heavyweight champion? Yeah, he's the goddamn heavyweight champion, and he had a great fight against Jerry Cooney, and that would be that great fifth round would be his last great round.
Yeah, and then it took about a year to get Once and For All, which this is a fight I think people forget. This was one of the biggest fights in history, because this is a fight where the national news, it was the lead story leading up to the fight. It was the lead story after the fight. It was on the front of the USA Today. This is one of the last heavyweight title fights that was like that. This was, I remember back at the time, CBS Sports, the old CBS Sports Spectacular, did a 1-hour preview show the Saturday before the fight. I think the fight was held during the week, like on a Monday or Tuesday, and this was one of the biggest fights in the history of boxing.
Oh yeah, Spinks was now really in the spotlight in the way that I bring on the David Letterman show, and boy, you can see he really doesn't know. He feels so awkward talking and being a star in a way.
Yeah.
He just was now you're at the top of the game. You're a big name. The name itself is big. Both brothers, the first brother combination to be heavyweight champions, and then you're facing Mike Tyson, who's got this incredible reputation, and you're finally elevated yourself to the point of where else can you go but down almost. I mean, if he could somehow, even when he's talking about taking on Tyson, acts like he doesn't really think he's going to beat him. He knows. He's just sort of saying, can I endure and take these punches and hang in there and stuff? But what are you going to do? Michael Spinks is overachieved, hasn't lost in 12 years.
I'll still bring up the fact that, the two knee braces, he hadn't fought for a year since he fought Cooney. I think the Spinks on September of 1985, when he fought Holmes, may have put up some resistance against Tyson, but this was a young heavyweight champion in his prime against towards the end of his prime, light heavyweight, and that's why this turned out the way it turned out.
Yeah, Michael Spinks, I guess we hadn't mentioned it, but yeah, I think in 1979, when he's training, running on concrete, wearing combat boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, injured knee permanently, and there's an elimination tournament that got Tyson into the number one person versus now, Michael Spinks is the only one left in the way. And it's really ridiculous that Mike Tyson's whole reputation is being invincible because he was able to knock out Michael Spinks so dominant because, hey, Spinks is still a middleweight gold winner in the Olympics and a light heavyweight champion. That's his natural position. So it wasn't like Mike Tyson had really faced was invincible against,
put it like this. Michael
heavyweight.
Spinks was the best fighter that Mike Tyson ever fought.
Yeah.
He beat him.
And that's zero. Yeah.
But when you compare the careers of Michael Spinks and Mike Tyson, it's not even close.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Spinks was a far greater fighter.
Top three heavyweights, light heavyweights of all time, Michael Spinks. Certainly a great Olympic, a champion. Only had 2 bouts, so that second one's incredibly dominant. And, Mike Tyson at that moment had just the overwhelming kind of attention that Muhammad Ali gets, as Joe Louis gets. Very few have the fans embrace them at that kind of level. And Mike Tyson with the early knockouts, the first-round knockout arts, and he does it to Michael Spinks with his 0 losses. But I don't think a lot of people knew a lot about Michael Spinks. So He took on a guy in his last fight, and Michael Spinks said, "I don't want to be one of these guys who retires and doesn't have any money." So they offered him a lot of money, and he tried to be slightly aggressive against Tyson, and Tyson just overwhelmed him, body shot, knocked him down, and then Spinks decided to walk forward against Tyson, almost like walking to a helicopter chopper blade, and Tyson, bam, knocks him flat on his back. Spinks tries to rise. He doesn't know where he's wandering backwards into the ropes. His eyes are spinning around, and Mike Tyson's all of a sudden the great invincible hero. Nobody will ever beat him. Everybody's afraid of him, and all kinds of things that just aren't true at Michael Spinks' expense as far as his reputation and the truth.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that stood out to me is if you watch this fight on pay-per-view or you watch the video now, was Butch Lewis picked a really lousy time to piss Mike Tyson off because Tyson was preparing to leave his dressing room and make his way to the ring for that Monday night title defense. And Spinks promoter and manager, Butch Lewis, spotted what he thought was a lump on the wrist of Tyson's left glove. He screams, "Hold it!" And, of course, the tuxedoed, bare-chested moron that Butch Lewis was, he said, "Get rid of that or we don't fight." It ends up delaying the fight, and I think I remember the story was that Tyson punched a hole in the wall, and Tyson turned to Kevin Rooney and said, "I'm going to kill that, or I'm going to hurt that guy." And the thing was, it was just Eddie Futch who let the fight go on because he said that it was harmless. And the other thing that stood out to me was how dry Michael Spinks was by the time he got to the ring.
Right, and they certainly could have had somebody watching Tyson get bandaged. They didn't have anyone there, and Tyson, for all his misgivings, didn't need to cheat in order to hit hard. At that point in his career, he had great defensive skills too. At that point, that was when Mike Tyson really was almost as great as people think. And then almost very quickly after that, he stopped playing defense and stuff. But I guess because this first round knockout against Michael Spinks, and then the next one was I think it was after Bruno was Charles Truth Williams, another winner. Tyson was kind of at his best when he fought Michael Spinks, and that's unfortunate for Michael Spinks. And you're right, pissing off Tyson, I don't think it made any difference, but it didn't help things, or didn't. Tyson just looks ferocious, and Michael Spinks just overwhelmed. And it is what it is. But I'm glad what we're trying to say is, hey, let's remember Michael Spinks. Mike Tyson's got a lot of people that like him, hate him, whatever they want to think. A lot of people to talk about him, and we're trying to not defend somebody, but remind people of. Yes, this man lost to Mike Tyson in 91 seconds, but he's one of the 3 top light heavyweights in history, and Tyson ain't one of the top 3 heavyweights in history. He's not one of the top 10
he's not one of the top
15 in history.
Yeah. Go to 20 or 30, maybe we can put him in. And the other thing about Michael Spinks is, he's one of the rare guys that retired, took care of his health, never entered a ring again. You don't see him running all over the place telling everybody how great he is. But an interesting story I wanted to bring up before we wrap this up, and that was with the first Larry Holmes fight, was Eddie Futch. Because Eddie Futch had trained Michael Spinks and Larry Holmes and decided in that first fight to sit it out and not train either one of them.
Yeah, that's when you sometimes get in these loyalty situations and stuff, you have to decide what are you going to do. And I do like that when you decide it's really in your best interest almost to sort of side one way or the other, but he respected both fighters, and I like that kind of stuff. It's badass, do the right thing in a sense.
Yeah, and I think with Michael Spinks, doing the right thing is what he's done his entire career. And the reason we did this show is because neither one of us think he gets the respect he should. And I think there's a case that he's the greatest light heavyweight of all time. I think when I did my list, I think him and Ezra Charles were 1, 2. I think I may have had Charles number 1, Michael Spinks at number 2. But when people bring up Archie Moore, the thing people don't get is when Michael Spinks ruled the light heavyweight division, which was basically 79 or 80 to about 85, that division was as good as it ever was. That was a deep division with the guys like Kwawi, Eddie Davis, Johnny Davis, Marvin Johnson. I wish we could have seen him fight Victor Galindez.
Oh, yeah. I guess but regardless, Michael Spinks held his own. He didn't seem to be avoiding people intentionally and stuff. Sometimes it's just the way these things work out.
Well, now,
I
Galindez
think
was at
only
the end of
Davis
his
got shit
career,
close.
though. I mean, Galindez 79-80 was about it for him anyways.
Yeah, and I will say that Michael Spinks, while he was missing a lot of punches with Eddie Davis, for the most part, he looks like he's always training well, and he usually mentally he's in all his fights. So he comes prepared, and then he thinks while he's in the ring based on the first couple of rounds against his opponents. So I like that a lot. I like that a person like Muhammad Ali used to do that, which is so great. Think while you're in the ring. What's happening? And I don't care what the fight plan is. If I see something, I'm the one in the ring, and I know what I'm doing too, and I'm going to go with what I'm seeing, and give up the game plan if it's in contradiction to what I'm seeing in the ring.
I'll tell you what, Victor Galindez would be a good one to do a show on.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Because the interesting thing there,
stuff.
if I remember right, is of course he lost to Mike Rossman, and then he came back and beat Mike Rossman. And he lost his title to Marvin Johnson, which was a shock. He lost to Jesse Burnett, I think, like July or August of 1980. And then he died right after that. I think he died towards the end of 1980.
Yes, somewhere in that area. And again, just you mentioned him earlier, but also amongst those light heavyweights that's sort of interesting is James Scott, because someone like him, he was in jail, so the only way you could fight him is you had to go to jail to fight him, because Scott couldn't fight anywhere else because he's in jail. So it was a very interesting time for that division, and a lot of the great fighters, even guys like Marvin Johnson's fun to watch, Cowie's fun to watch.
Jesse Burnett, Yaki Lopez, Mike Rossman.
Oh yeah.
Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Richie Cates. You remember Richie?
Yeah, for my own picking, if anyone wants the YouTube things, I definitely say Yaki Lopez, Michael Spinks. It's fun. It's a lot of fun if you just like a great aggressive offensive show, really, especially on Yaki Lopez's part, and then see Michael Spinks, the great thinker and counterpuncher, and it's a lot of fun, especially of all. It's fun to watch the Mexican Yaki Lopez, who never won the title, but came awfully damn close, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think he has a case that he beat Galindez when he fought him for the title, but it is what it is. Sometimes you don't get the decision. Yaki is a great guy, and the thing about Yaki was, when I got to interview him a year or two ago, was he was in a ton of wars, and you would never know it from talking to him. There's no slurring, nothing like that. He's really active. He's got a really nice wife, and I think I interviewed him like on Christmas Eve. And it was one of my favorite interviews. He was a great guy. He was one of my favorite fighters growing up. And if you want to see a great fight, go watch either fight with him and Matthew Saad Muhammad. And in the end, the guy I really would have liked to seen Spinks fight would have been Saad Muhammad.
Oh yeah, that's the one disappointing. That's probably of all the foes, the one that's too bad, because it was supposed to be set up, but he took Eddie Davis instead. And that's the one opponent that I wish Michael Spinks had fought. And I got to tell you, because I'm a fan, that I'm stuck with cleaning the bathroom sink for an hour after this interview. But I'm going to go ahead and listen to your interview with Yaki Lopez, because I think it's going to be a hell of a great interview, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate it. And everybody else should go listen to it, too, on thegrillertruth.com. And Matthew Saad Muhammad would be a good show to do, too, because I think that's a guy that was very underrated. And I think the biggest problem with him was, they would have had to fight in 80 or 81, and really he was on the downside of his career probably by the time you get to the middle of 1981. But people talk about him like an Arturo Gatti, and he really wasn't. He was better than an Arturo Gatti. He beat Yaki Lopez twice. He beat Jerry the Bull Martin, Murray Sutherland, guys we hadn't even brought up before about this. Beat John Conte twice, even though I think the first one might have been a draw, but he beat Marvin Johnson in an absolutely epic fight also. Beat Richie Cates.
Right.
He beat Buster Douglas's daddy. There you go. He lost a close fight to Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, lost a close decision to Marvin Camel, but also beat Marvin Camel, also beat Matty Parlov. So when you look at those names, Matthew Saad Muhammad wasn't just one of these great action warriors. He was a great fighter.
He was, and I would say that's the only the only opponent that I wish Spinks had fought, but nonetheless, when he took Eddie Davis, people would have thought if he had not fought Davis and fought Muhammad instead, Davis wouldn't be on the list of, I really wish he had fought Eddie Davis. But it turns out Eddie Davis was all that.
Yeah, but he fought Eddie
he
Davis in '84, and Matthew Saad Muhammad was damaged goods by '84.
Yeah, I think so. I really think that Michael Spinks was the dominant force. And people are viewing him that way really only after 5 professional fights or more that this is going to be the dominant guy. He's almost there, even though, thank goodness, he did take his time to a certain degree. It doesn't seem like he take periods off. It doesn't seem like he wasn't fighting that much, but they're quality opponents. And then he did like to take fights a little bit longer because he said he just liked the training and learning of fights that if they ended short, he thinks he would have learned less. So when he fought somebody like Murray Sutherland.
That's who I was thinking of when you said that too, because I thought he carried Murray a little bit.
I think he was. I think that he wanted the exercise, the fight, the training, and I think he knew he was dominating it. And then the first time around went to decision, and then the second time around, finally Sutherland started trying to tackle him and started to get really crazy and then Spinks went ahead.
Murray Sutherland was a good fighter, actually.
Oh, he was. But he was clearly outclassed by Michael Spinks. Yeah. Especially when Michael Spinks decided he started landing his accurate punches, and Sutherland's just getting hit with everything, right, left. When Spinks decides to go for the accuracy kill, he just hits you with everything. If you're not quite at that level, Murray Sutherland's just really not at the same kind of level. Though he's a great fighter. I'm glad he's in the game, but Michael Spinks, once he wanted to dominate, him could. And I agree that he carried him, or at least he didn't seem overly interested in knocking him out the first time around or too quickly in the second fight.
All right, guys. Chris, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. As always, it was a pleasure to talk a little boxing history with you.
A lot of fun. It was a great topic, and I'm glad we hope people, again, look back and try to watch some of these Michael Spinks fights.
All right, guys, and if you like watching the old fights, you can go to our YouTube channel, The Grueling Truth, find a ton of fights. And you can also go to our Facebook page. We're daily. We'll run 5 or 6 fights a day. We had Michael Spinks, Oscar Rivenderia not too long ago. And there'll be 3 or 4 more fights on tonight. So make sure you go follow and like our Facebook group. You can hear all of our shows anywhere that has podcasts now. We are pretty much everywhere, whether it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes. All you got to do is look for The Grueling Truth. So for now, for Chris Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.